They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But as I sat in the back of my town car that night, champagne dripping from my ruined evening gown, my hands trembling with rage and humiliation, I knew my revenge would be served scalding hot, immediate, and utterly devastating. Because at that very moment, while my father stood inside Westbrook Manor toasting to his empire, he had no idea that the empire no longer belonged to him. It belonged to me. My name is Darcy Nelson, and this is the story of how I went from being the family disgrace to the woman who owned everything they held dear. The night of the gala started like every other attempt I had made to reconnect with my family. I had chosen my dress carefully, a midnight blue evening gown that cost more than I wanted to admit, elegant but not ostentatious. I had my hair styled in loose waves, my makeup flawless. I wanted to look successful, confident, like someone they could finally be proud of. As I walked up the marble steps of Westbrook Manor, the estate where I had spent my miserable childhood, my heart was pounding with a mixture of hope and dread that I should have recognized as a warning sign. The moment I stepped through those grand double doors, I should have turned around. The foyer was packed with guests in glittering gowns and tuxedos, champagne flowing freely, a string quartet playing in the corner. This was supposed to be a celebration of the Harrington legacy, a showcase of wealth and power. And there I was, the unwanted daughter, hoping against hope that maybe this time would be different. My father spotted me immediately. William Harrington, the great banking titan, stood near the grand staircase holding court with a circle of admirers. At 60 years old, he still cut an imposing figure in his custom suit, silver hair swept back, jaw set in that perpetual expression of stern disapproval. The moment his eyes landed on me, his face transformed from practiced charm to pure disgust. "What the hell is she doing here?" His voice cut through the music and conversation like a knife. Every head in the room turned toward me. I felt my face flush hot, my carefully rehearsed greeting dying on my lips. I took a step forward anyway, determined to maintain my dignity. "Father, I just wanted to—" "You wanted to what?" He strode toward me, and I could see the fury building in his eyes. "Come here and embarrass this family? Remind everyone of our greatest disappointment?" The guests had fallen silent now, 100 pairs of eyes watching this public humiliation unfold. I opened my mouth to respond. But before I could say a word, my father grabbed the champagne glass from my hand with such force that the liquid sloshed over the rim. Then, with deliberate cruelty, he tipped the entire contents onto my dress. The cold champagne soaked through the delicate fabric immediately, creating a dark, spreading stain across my chest and stomach. Gasps echoed through the room. I stood there, frozen in shock and mortification, as champagne dripped onto the marble floor. "Security!" My father's voice boomed through the hall. "Get this beggar out of my house." Beggar. The word hit me like a physical blow. I had built a multi-million-dollar technology company from nothing. I had contracts with Fortune 500 companies. I employed over 200 people. And he called me a beggar. My brother James appeared at my father's side, a smug grin on his handsome face. At 38, James was everything I wasn't in my father's eyes. Charismatic, conventionally successful in finance, and most importantly, willing to be my father's puppet. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket with an exaggerated flourish. "Here, Darcy," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "You look like you need this." Then he let it drop to the floor at my feet, just out of reach, and laughed. "Oops, clumsy me." My sister Amanda joined them, her designer gown shimmering under the chandeliers. At 32, she had perfected the art of looking concerned while delivering devastating blows. "Oh, Darcy, honey," she said in a syrupy voice, "this is so embarrassing for you. Maybe you should go home and change? Or better yet, maybe you shouldn't come to family events anymore. You know, to save yourself this kind of situation." My mother Eleanor stood off to the side, her face carefully neutral, not meeting my eyes. She wouldn't help me. She never did. Maintaining the family's image was all that mattered to her, and right now, I was damaging that image simply by existing. 2 security guards materialized on either side of me. They weren't gentle. One grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise, and they half-dragged, half-marched me toward the door. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, everyone eager to distance themselves from the spectacle. I caught glimpses of faces, some shocked, some pitying, some gleeful at witnessing a Harrington family drama. The heavy doors slammed shut behind me with a finality that echoed in my chest. I stood on the steps for a moment, my vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. My dress was ruined. My dignity was in tatters. But as I walked toward my car on shaking legs, something inside me crystallized into diamond-hard determination. I slid into the back seat of my town car, and my driver Marcus caught my eye in the rearview mirror. He had seen everything, had been with me long enough to know my history with this family. "Miss Nelson, I'm so sorry," he said quietly. I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers and opened my banking app. There, in cold digital numbers, was the notification I had been waiting for. Transaction complete. Westbrook Manor acquisition finalized. All documentation filed with county registrar. Effective immediately. A laugh bubbled up from my chest, harsh and almost hysterical. They had thrown me out of my own property. The house where my father stood right now, toasting to his power and legacy, no longer belonged to him. As of 9 o'clock this morning, Westbrook Manor and all its grounds belonged to Nelson Technologies. Belonged to me. "Marcus," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Take me home. I need to change into something more appropriate. Then we're coming back." "Ma'am?" "I'm going back to my house," I said, and this time the smile that crossed my face was genuine, and I'm going to introduce myself to my guests. As Marcus pulled away from Westbrook Manor, I leaned my head back against the leather seat and closed my eyes, letting the memories wash over me. If my family wanted to know how I had gotten here, how the worthless daughter had become powerful enough to buy their legacy out from under them, they would need to understand the journey that had brought me to this moment. I grew up in Westbrook Manor, but I was never really part of the family that lived there. From my earliest memories, I was different, and different was not tolerated in the Harrington household. While James learned about stock portfolios and Amanda perfected her social climbing skills, I spent my time taking apart computers and teaching myself to code. My father saw it as a waste of time, a peculiar hobby of a peculiar child. "Stop playing with those ridiculous machines," he would say, snatching my laptop away. "You need to learn about real business, money, investments, not this nonsense." But it wasn't nonsense to me. Technology was a language I understood, a world where logic and creativity mattered more than family name or birth order. It was where I felt powerful, capable, seen. Everything I wasn't in my own home. The breaking point came when I was 25. I had been working on a business plan for months, a cybersecurity startup that I believed could revolutionize how small businesses protected their data. I had researched, run the numbers, prepared a comprehensive pitch. All I needed was seed funding, and I hoped, naively, that my father might see the potential and invest. I can still see his face when I presented my business plan to him in his study. I had dressed professionally, had my materials organized in a leather folder, had practiced my pitch until I could deliver it in my sleep. For the first few minutes, he seemed to be listening. Then his expression changed. "This is what you've been wasting your time on?" He picked up my carefully prepared documents and, without even finishing reading them, tore them in half. Then he threw them in the wastebasket beside his desk. Garbage. Absolute garbage. "But father, if you would just look at the projections." "Projections?" He stood up, towering over me. "I'll tell you what I project. I project that you will continue to embarrass this family with your ridiculous fantasies. I project that you will never amount to anything because you refuse to listen to people who actually understand business." He pointed at the door. "Get out of my office. And until you're ready to stop this childish nonsense and accept a real position in a real company, don't ask me for another cent." That was the day I realized my father would never see me, would never believe in me, would never love me the way he loved James, who had never had an original idea in his life but knew how to parrot back everything father said. I went to my mother that night, desperate for someone in my family to understand. I found her in her sitting room, going over seating charts for some charity gala. "Mother, please," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just need someone to believe in me. This business idea, it's good, I know it is. I just need help getting started." She didn't even look up from her papers. "Darcy, your father knows best about these things. If he says it's not viable, then it's not viable. You should really consider the position at Anderson & Associates that he arranged for you. It's very generous of him. I don't want to be a junior analyst at someone else's firm. I want to build something of my own." Finally, she met my eyes, and what I saw there was worse than my father's anger. It was indifference. "That's very nice, dear, but you need to be realistic about your abilities. Not everyone is cut out to be an entrepreneur. There's no shame in accepting help and guidance." I left that conversation feeling more alone than I had ever felt in my life. But there was one person who had always believed in me. My grandmother, Elizabeth. She lived in a small cottage on the edge of the estate, and I went to her that night with tears streaming down my face. Grandmother Elizabeth was everything my father wasn't: warm, thoughtful, genuinely interested in who I was rather than who she wanted me to be. She listened to my entire business plan, asked thoughtful questions, and when I was done, she took my hands in hers. "Darcy," she said, her blue eyes sharp and clear despite her 78 years, "you are different from them, and that difference is going to change the world. Don't let them dim your light." "But I don't have any money to start. No one will invest in me." She smiled. "I will. I have some funds set aside. Not much, but it's yours. Build your dream, darling girl. Show them all what you're capable of." 6 months later, Grandmother Elizabeth passed away suddenly. At her funeral, I was numb with grief, but also filled with determination. She had left me $50,000 in her will, and my father was furious when the lawyer read it out loud. That money should have gone to the family business. He hissed at me after the reading. But no, Mother always had a soft spot for lost causes. With that $50,000 and grandmother Elizabeth's belief in me, I left Westbrook Manor for good. I was 26 years old, and I was going to prove them all wrong. The next few years were the hardest of my life. I worked 3 jobs while building Securitech solutions from the ground up. I was a waitress at a diner from 6 to 2 in the afternoon. I worked as a night security guard from midnight to 6 in the morning. And every spare moment in between, I wrote code, met with potential clients, and built my business. I lived in a tiny studio apartment where the heating barely worked in winter. I ate ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches. I wore the same 3 outfits on rotation because I couldn't afford more. But I was free. I wasn't under my father's thumb anymore. I wasn't watching James and Amanda receive praise and opportunities that I would never get. I was on my own, and it was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. My first client was a small accounting firm that needed better data protection. I charged them barely enough to cover my costs, but they were happy with my work and referred me to another small business. Then another. Slowly, painfully slowly, Securitech Solutions began to grow. 3 years after leaving Westbrook Manor, I landed my first major contract, a cybersecurity system for a regional hospital network. The contract was worth $500,000. I hired my first employee, then my second, then my 5th. I moved into a small office. I finally felt like I was becoming someone. I didn't contact my family during this time, and they certainly didn't contact me. The only person I stayed in touch with was my cousin Sophie, who had always been kind to me. She would send me updates occasionally, and her messages painted a picture of a family slowly unraveling beneath its perfect facade. James had made several bad investments, she told me. He was increasingly desperate to prove himself to father, but kept making mistake after mistake. Amanda was engaged to some aristocrat who turned out to be broke, and after the family money. Father's investment firm was starting to struggle as the market shifted in ways he didn't understand. Mother was drinking more, attending fewer social functions. But what really caught my attention was Sophie's message about Westbrook Manor. Apparently, father had taken out several loans using the estate as collateral. With the business struggles, those loans were becoming harder to service. There were whispers that the bank might foreclose. That was when the plan began to form in my mind. It wasn't revenge, not exactly. Or maybe it was, but it was also something else. It was justice. It was reclamation. It was taking back everything they had tried to take from me. I spent the next 2 years researching every aspect of my father's financial situation. I used perfectly legal methods, public records, financial disclosures, corporate filings. I tracked every loan, every asset, every vulnerability. And I discovered that William Harrington's empire was built on a foundation of sand. Securitech Solutions continued to grow. We landed contracts with major corporations, expanded into artificial intelligence security, developed proprietary software that became industry standard. By the time I was 34, my company was worth over $100 million. I was wealthy beyond anything I had imagined when I was eating ramen in that studio apartment. But money wasn't enough. I needed something more. When Sophie sent me a message saying that the bank was preparing to foreclose on Westbrook Manor, I made my move. I contacted the bank through a shell company I had created, made them an offer they couldn't refuse for the deed and all associated debts. The transaction was confidential, would remain confidential until I decided otherwise, and would close the day of the family's annual gala. The symmetry was too perfect to resist. The same event where I had always been made to feel worthless would become the stage for my triumph. And now, here I was, sitting in my car in a champagne-soaked dress, holding the deed to my family's legacy in my digital files, preparing to return and reveal the truth. Marcus drove me to my penthouse apartment downtown. I showered quickly, washing away the champagne and the humiliation. Then I stood in my closet, considering my options. The blue dress had been chosen to blend in, to not threaten. But I wasn't trying to blend in anymore. I pulled out a red dress, bold and striking. It was fitted, elegant, powerful. The kind of dress that demanded attention. I paired it with sharp black heels that added 3 inches to my height. I left my hair loose, applied darker lipstick. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the girl who had been thrown out of Westbrook Manor. I saw a woman who owned Westbrook Manor. The drive back to the estate felt different this time. The nervousness was gone, replaced by a calm certainty. I had the element of surprise, the power of ownership, and most importantly, the absolute conviction that I was right. When Marcus pulled up to the entrance again, the security guards recognized the car and stepped forward with hostile expressions, clearly ready to prevent another scene. But I was ready this time. I stepped out of the car before anyone could touch me, and the change in my appearance, my demeanor, made them hesitate. I walked up to the larger of the 2 guards and held out a leather folder. "I'm Darcy Nelson, CEO of Nelson Technologies. I said calmly. As of 9 o'clock this morning, I am the legal owner of Westbrook Manor and all its grounds. This folder contains the deed transfer, all supporting documentation, and proof of payment. I suggest you verify this with your supervisor before you make any decisions you'll regret. The guard's eyes widened. He took the folder, opened it, and I watched his face change as he read. The second guard was already on his radio, calling someone. Within minutes, Mr. Rivera, the estate manager, came hurrying out. Rivera was an older man who had worked at Westbrook Manor since before I was born. He had always been kind to me, in the quiet way that servants learn to show compassion without overstepping. When he saw me, something flickered in his eyes that might have been recognition, might have been respect. "Miss Nelson," he said, looking at the documents. "I've just been on the phone with the county registrar's office. They confirm the transfer is legal and binding. You are indeed the owner of this property." "Thank you, Mr. Rivera. I'm glad you're still here. I'm going to need your help." "Of course, Miss Nelson. Anything you need." I could see the security guards' expressions changing, uncertainty replacing hostility. They were employees of an estate that no longer belonged to the man who had hired them. Their loyalty was about to be tested. "I'm going back inside now," I said. "This time, no one is going to throw me out. Are we clear?" They stepped aside immediately. Mr. Rivera opened the door for me, and I walked back into Westbrook Manor. But this time, I wasn't a guest. I was the owner. The party was still in full swing. No one had noticed my absence, or, if they had, they assumed I had left in disgrace. I moved through the crowd toward the main ballroom, and heads began to turn again. Whispers followed in my wake. "That's her. That's the daughter. Why is she back?" My father was standing near the grand fireplace, holding court with a circle of guests that included Harrison Wells, a real estate mogul known for his ruthless business practices. Father was in the middle of some pronouncement, gesturing grandly with his champagne glass. "The future of Westbrook Manor is secure," he was saying. "Through strategic partnerships and forward-thinking business decisions, the Harrington legacy will continue for generations." I almost laughed. Strategic partnerships. Forward-thinking. He had no idea how ironic those words were about to become. I walked straight up to the group, and Father's eyes landed on me. His face went from confusion to fury in a heartbeat. "You," he snarled, setting down his glass. "Security! I thought I told you to." "Father." My voice cut through his bluster like a knife. It was calm, controlled, and loud enough that people nearby stopped their conversations to listen. "Before you call security again, there's something you should know. There's something everyone here should know." The room was growing quieter, more people turning to watch. James pushed through the crowd, Amanda right behind him. Mother appeared from somewhere, her face pale. "Darcy, what are you doing?" Mother hissed. "You're making a scene." "Oh, I'm definitely making a scene," I agreed, "but not the one you think." I turned to address the room at large. At least 100 people were watching now, including some of Father's most important business associates and social connections. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption. But there seems to be some confusion about tonight's announcement. My father mentioned strategic partnerships and the future of Westbrook Manor. But here's what he neglected to mention." I pulled out my phone, held it up so the screen was visible. "As of this morning, Westbrook Manor no longer belongs to the Harrington family. It belongs to me." The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop in that massive ballroom. Father's face went from red to white. "What the hell are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that you mortgaged this estate to the hilt. You borrowed against it repeatedly, using it as collateral for increasingly desperate business ventures. And when those ventures failed, you couldn't keep up with the payments. The bank was going to foreclose. So I bought the property from them. All legal, all above board, all completed this morning. Mr. Rivera can confirm, as can the county registrar's office." "Mr." Rivera stepped forward from where he had been standing near the entrance. "It's true, Mr. Harrington. I verified the documents. Miss Nelson is now the legal owner of the estate." Father's champagne glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble floor. Mother made a small sound, almost like a whimper, and collapsed into a nearby chair. James pulled out his phone, his fingers shaking as he tried to pull up something, anything that would contradict what I was saying. Amanda recovered first, her voice shrill. "This is insane. You can't just buy someone's house out from under them. That's not how it works." "Actually, Amanda, that's exactly how it works when that house is in foreclosure and the bank wants to recover its money. I made them a very attractive offer. They were happy to accept." Harrison Wells, who had been watching this entire exchange with fascination, suddenly laughed. It was a deep, appreciative sound. "Darcy Nelson, I'll be damned. You're the CEO of Securitech Solutions, aren't you? I've been following your company's growth. Impressive work." "Thank you, Mr. Wells. And you just bought your own family's estate without them knowing?" He laughed again. "That's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. William, I have to say, you've raised one hell of a businesswoman. even if she is using those skills against you. Father found his voice then, and it was filled with a rage I had never heard before. You little bitch. You think you can just waltz in here and destroy everything I've built? No, I said calmly. I think I can waltz in here and claim what I built, because I'm the one who bought it, Father. I'm the one who earned the money to purchase this estate when you were too proud and too incompetent to save it yourself. He lunged toward me, and for a moment I thought he might actually strike me. But James caught his arm, holding him back. My brother's face was a mixture of shock and something that might have been fear. Darcy, James said, his voice strained. Let's talk about this reasonably. We're family. We can work something out. Family? I turned to look at him fully. Is that what you're going to claim now? Because I seem to remember you mocking me, sabotaging me, laughing at my dreams at every opportunity. And speaking of working things out, James, do you remember that loan you took from me 2 years ago? The one you needed for that sure thing investment that ended up losing everything? You promised to pay me back with interest. I still have the paperwork, all $30,000 of it. When can I expect repayment? James's face went pale. He glanced at Father, who was staring at him with a look of utter betrayal. You borrowed money from her? Father's voice was dangerously quiet. It was just temporary. I was going to... You borrowed money from the daughter we disowned because you were too incompetent to manage your own finances? Father's voice was rising again. And you never told me? I can explain. But I wasn't done. I turned to Amanda, who was trying to blend into the crowd. And Amanda, dear sister, do you remember telling my first potential investor that I had a mental breakdown? That I was unstable and couldn't be trusted with a business? He pulled his funding because of you. It took me 6 extra months to find another investor. 6 months of eating ramen and wondering if I would have to give up. Amanda's face flushed. I was trying to protect him. You weren't ready for that kind of responsibility. You were trying to keep me down, just like you always did. Just like all of you always did. I looked at each of them in turn. Father, Mother, James, Amanda. You treated me like I was worthless, like I was a burden, an embarrassment, and maybe I believed it for a while. Maybe I thought that if I just tried harder, worked harder, proved myself enough, you would finally see me, finally love me. My voice was steady, but I could feel years of pain welling up behind my words. But you know what I finally realized? I don't need your love. I don't need your approval. I don't need anything from you at all, because I built something real, something valuable, something that matters, and I did it without any of you. Mother stood up from her chair, tears streaming down her face. Darcy, please, you're right. We were wrong. We were terrible to you, but we're still your family. You can't just throw us out. Can't I? I looked at her. You stood by and watched them tear me down. You never once defended me. You never once chose me. Why should I choose you now? Because we're your parents, Father said, but his voice had lost its commanding edge. He looked older suddenly, smaller. We made mistakes, but family is family. Family is supposed to protect you, not destroy you. Family is supposed to lift you up, not tear you down. You gave up the right to call yourself my family a long time ago. I took a breath, steadying myself. But I'm not going to throw you out tonight. That would be too easy, too quick. Instead, I'm going to give you a choice. I pulled out a folder from my bag, the one I had prepared for exactly this moment. Harrington Investment Group is failing. Your personal debts are mounting. And there are some very interesting discrepancies in your tax filings over the last 5 years. Nothing criminal, perhaps, but enough to trigger a very uncomfortable audit. Unless, of course, you accept my terms. What terms? Father's voice was hoarse. Option 1. You transfer controlling interest in Harrington Investment Group to me. I restructure it. I clean up the mess you've made, and I save what can be saved. You can stay on as a figurehead if you want, but all real decisions go through me. Option 2. You resign quietly, claim health concerns, and walk away. I'll make sure the IRS doesn't take too close a look at those tax returns. But you give up any claim to the business, to this estate, to any Harrington assets. You can't do this, Father whispered. I already did. I looked around the room at all the watching faces, and I'm doing it in front of witnesses. In front of your peers and your business associates, so they all know exactly what kind of man you are and exactly what kind of woman I've become. Harrison Wells was watching me with unconcealed admiration now. Miss Nelson, I have a proposition for you. Wells Industries is looking to invest in smart home technology. Your company's security systems would be a perfect fit. I'd like to discuss a partnership, a real one, not whatever scheme your father was trying to pull. I'd be interested in hearing more, Mr. Wells. Though I should make it clear that Westbrook Manor will not be developed into luxury condominiums, which I believe was part of the plan you and my father were discussing. No? Wells raised an eyebrow. No. I have different plans for this estate. I'm going to turn it into a technology incubator for underprivileged youth. A place where kids who have talent but no resources can learn, grow, and build their dreams. The way I wish I had been able to when I was growing up here. The room erupted in murmurs. Some people looked shocked, others looked approving. Sophie, who I hadn't noticed in the crowd before, was crying and smiling at the same time. Father was shaking his head. "You're insane. This is insane. You can't just destroy everything I've built because you're angry at me." "I'm not destroying anything, Father. I'm transforming it. I'm taking something that was built on cruelty and ego and turning it into something that actually matters. Something that helps people instead of hurting them." "I won't accept this," he said, but his voice was weak. "I won't sign anything." "Then option 2 it is. You'll be hearing from my lawyers in the morning. Mr. Rivera, I think it's time to ask the guests to leave. The party is over." "Mr." Rivera nodded and began moving through the crowd, politely but firmly indicating that the evening was concluded. People filed out slowly, many of them stopping to shake my hand, to congratulate me, to ask for my business card. Harrison Wells promised to call me in the morning. Several other business owners approached me with interest in Securitech Solutions services. My family stood frozen in the center of the emptying ballroom. James looked lost. Amanda was crying quietly. Mother was staring at me like she didn't recognize me, and Father was just staring at the floor, his entire world crumbling around him. Sophie made her way to me and pulled me into a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "So incredibly proud." "Thank you for keeping me informed all these years," I whispered back. "I couldn't have done this without you." When the last guest had left, and it was just me, my family, and a few staff members, I spoke again. "You can stay here tonight. I'm not cruel enough to make you leave immediately. But tomorrow I want you out. Find an apartment, a hotel, whatever you want. But this is my house now, and you're not welcome here anymore." "Darcy," Mother said, her voice breaking, "please, don't do this. Give us another chance." I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt something inside me crack just a little. She looked so old, so broken. But I couldn't let myself soften. Not now. "You had chances, Mother. Hundreds of them. Every time I asked for your support and you turned away. Every time I showed you my work and you dismissed it. Every time I needed you and you chose him instead." I nodded toward Father. "I'm done giving chances." I turned and walked away, my heels clicking on the marble floor. Mr. Rivera met me at the door. "Miss Nelson, where would you like me to prepare a room for you?" "The master suite," I said. "My father won't be needing it anymore." That night, I lay in my father's bed, in the room where he had made so many decisions that affected my life, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. It wasn't the triumphant victory I had imagined. It was quieter than that, sadder in some ways. But it was real. Over the next few weeks, the full extent of what I had done began to sink in. My father fought the restructuring at first, but when his lawyers reviewed the evidence I had compiled, they advised him to accept my terms. He chose option 2, resignation. He held a press conference citing health concerns and stepped down from Harrington Investment Group. I took over as CEO and immediately began implementing changes. James tried to reach out to me several times. His messages started out angry, then became pleading, then finally evolved into something that might have been genuine remorse. I didn't respond at first, but eventually, I agreed to meet him for coffee. He looked terrible. His usual polished appearance was gone, replaced by rumpled clothes and dark circles under his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said before I could even sit down. "Darcy, I'm so sorry. For everything. I was a terrible brother. I was cruel and selfish, and I let Dad turn me into someone I hate." I sat down across from him, studying his face. "Do you actually mean that, James? Or are you just sorry because you lost?" He flinched. "Both, maybe. I don't know. I've been thinking a lot these past few weeks, about how we treated you, about how I treated you, and I'm ashamed. I'm ashamed of who I was." "Being ashamed isn't the same as being sorry." "I know. But it's a start, isn't it?" He looked at me with desperate eyes. "Can you give me a chance to prove I've changed?" "Not for anything in return. I'm not asking for my job back or for money or anything like that. I want my sister back, the one I should have protected instead of tormented." I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to reject him outright, to keep him at arm's length forever. But another part of me, the part that remembered being 7 years old and thinking my big brother was the coolest person alive, wanted to believe him. "I don't know, James," I said finally. "Maybe someday. But not today. You have a lot of work to do on yourself first." He nodded, accepting this. "I understand. And Darcy, what you're doing with Westbrook Manor, turning it into an incubator, it's brilliant. It's the kind of thing that actually matters. Something to be proud of." After he left, I sat in the coffee shop for a long time, thinking about forgiveness and whether I was capable of it. I wasn't sure yet. Amanda, on the other hand, sent me a series of messages that ranged from apologetic to accusatory. She wanted to meet, wanted to explain, wanted me to understand that she had been under pressure too. But her apologies always came with justifications, always came with attempts to shift blame. I blocked her number after 2 weeks. My mother reached out through Sophie, asking if we could talk. I agreed to see her, but only in a neutral location. We met at a small restaurant downtown, and she looked diminished somehow, less than the elegant socialite I had grown up with. "I know I failed you," she said, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she wasn't drinking. "I know I should have been stronger, should have stood up for you. I was afraid, Darcy. Afraid of your father, afraid of losing my place in society, afraid of admitting that my marriage was built on something hollow." "You chose him over me," I said quietly, "every single time." "I know, and I hate myself for it. I'm in therapy now. I'm trying to understand why I made the choices I did. Why I let you suffer rather than risk my own comfort." Tears were running down her face. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I don't deserve that. But I want you to know that I see now what I didn't see then. You were the strongest one in our family, the bravest one, and I was too weak to recognize it." I reached across the table and took her hand. It was a small gesture, but it felt enormous. "I appreciate you saying that. But I need time, Mother. I need space to heal from everything that happened. Maybe someday we can have a real relationship, but it won't be the one we had before. That's gone forever." She nodded, squeezing my hand. "I understand, and I'll wait, however long it takes." My father never apologized. He moved to Florida, cut off contact with everyone, and as far as I know, spent his days playing golf and nursing his bitterness. Sophie told me he tells people that I stole his company, that I manipulated him, that I'm an ungrateful daughter who destroyed her own family. Let him tell whatever story helps him sleep at night. Westbrook Manor's transformation took 8 months. I hired architects, educators, technology experts. We gutted the old ballroom and turned it into a state-of-the-art computer lab. The formal dining room became a collaborative workspace. The library, which had always been my favorite room, became a quiet study area filled with resources on coding, entrepreneurship, and technology. We launched the Westbrook Technology Initiative on what would have been my grandmother Elizabeth's 80th birthday. It was a full scholarship program for underprivileged youth interested in technology careers. We accepted 30 students in our first class, kids from rough neighborhoods and broken homes, kids who had talent but no resources, kids who reminded me so much of myself. At the opening ceremony, I stood at the podium looking out at the students, their families, the staff we had hired, and the media covering the event. Sophie was in the front row, beaming. Harrison Wells was there too. He had become a major donor and a genuine mentor. "This place used to represent everything wrong with my life," I told the assembled crowd. "It represented exclusion, cruelty, and the belief that some people matter more than others based solely on who their parents are. But today, it represents something different. Today, it represents possibility. It represents the idea that talent and hard work and determination matter more than family name or bank account. It represents the future." The students applauded, and I felt something shift inside me. This was what success looked like. Not revenge, not wealth, not even justice. This was about transformation, about taking something painful and turning it into something meaningful. Securitech Solutions continued to grow. Within 2 years, we expanded into artificial intelligence security, developed partnerships with major tech companies, and opened offices in 3 new cities. I hired over 300 employees, many of them graduates of the Westbrook Technology Initiative. We became known not just for our innovative products, but for our ethical practices and our commitment to diversity. Harrison Wells became an unexpected ally and friend. He was still cutthroat in business, but he respected competence and integrity. We collaborated on several smart home security projects that revolutionized the industry. He told me once that watching me take down my father was the most impressive business move he'd ever witnessed. "You didn't just win," he said over dinner one night. "You completely changed the game. Most people would have gloated, would have rubbed their victory in everyone's faces. But you turned it into something constructive. That takes real strength." "I didn't do it to be strong," I said. "I did it because I was tired of being treated like I was worthless. And now? Now I know my worth, and it has nothing to do with them." 2 years after the gala, James showed up at my office. He looked different, healthier, more settled, less desperate to prove something. "I got a job," he said without preamble, "teaching business ethics at the community college. It doesn't pay much, but I like it. I like helping people avoid the mistakes I made." "That's great, James. I wanted you to know, and I wanted to ask if maybe we could have dinner sometime, just as siblings. No expectations, no agenda, just reconnecting." I thought about it for a long moment. Then I nodded. "Okay, let's try dinner." That dinner was awkward and difficult. We both said things that hurt. We both brought up old wounds. But we also laughed a few times. We also remembered a few good moments from our childhood, before everything went so wrong. It wasn't healing, not yet. But it was a start. Mother and I gradually rebuilt something that resembled a relationship. It would never be the mother-daughter bond that some people have, but it was honest in a way our old relationship never was. She came to Westbrook Technology Initiative events sometimes, and I could see the pride in her eyes when she looked at what I had built. Amanda reached out through a mutual friend after 3 years, asking to meet. I almost said no, but Sophie convinced me to give her one chance. We met for lunch, and Amanda was different. She had left the city, was working as a teacher in a small town, had married someone who actually loved her rather than her family name. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said, but I wanted you to know that I'm working on becoming a better person, someone you might actually want as a sister someday. Why the change? I asked. Losing everything forced me to look at who I really was, and I hated what I saw. I spent my whole life trying to be what Dad wanted, trying to compete with you in the most toxic ways. It took losing it all to realize I never wanted that life in the first place. What do you want now? To be authentic, to be kind, to matter in a way that actually means something. She looked at me with clear eyes. Like you do. I didn't immediately welcome her back into my life, but I didn't shut the door either. Over time, we found a way to be civil, then friendly, then something approaching sisterhood. It wasn't what we had been, but it was better than what we were. My father remained the one unchanging element. He never apologized, never acknowledged any wrongdoing, never made any attempt at reconciliation, and I found that I was okay with that. I didn't need his approval anymore. I didn't need him to see me or value me or love me. I had built a life that mattered without him, and that was enough. 5 years after the gala, I stood on the balcony of Westbrook Manor, looking out over the gardens. The estate was alive with activity, students working on projects, teachers conducting classes, visitors touring the facilities. It was everything I had imagined and more. Sophie found me there, bringing me a cup of coffee. Big day tomorrow, she said. The expansion announcement. I know, I'm nervous. You're Darcy Nelson. You're never nervous. I laughed. I'm always nervous. I just hide it well. We stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the grounds. I thought about the girl I had been, desperate for approval, willing to accept crumbs of affection. I thought about the woman who had been thrown out of this very house, champagne dripping from her dress, humiliation burning in her chest. And I thought about who I had become, a woman who built rather than destroyed, who lifted others up rather than tearing them down, who knew her own worth regardless of what anyone else thought. Do you ever regret it? Sophie asked quietly. The way you did things? The revenge? I considered the question. Sometimes I wonder if I could have handled it differently. Less dramatically. But then I remember that they wouldn't have heard me any other way. They didn't listen when I spoke quietly. They didn't listen when I pleaded. They only listened when I forced them to, when I held all the cards and they had no choice. And now? Now I'm not interested in revenge anymore. I'm interested in building something that matters, in proving that success isn't about crushing other people. It's about lifting them up. I smiled. Though I won't lie, there's a certain satisfaction in knowing that I succeeded on my own terms, in my own way. The next day, we announced the expansion of the Westbrook Technology Initiative to 3 more cities. We were partnering with other tech companies, creating a nationwide network of incubators. The program I had started in one estate would soon be helping thousands of young people across the country. At the press conference, a reporter asked me about my family, about the dramatic way I had acquired Westbrook Manor. My family taught me some very important lessons, I said carefully. They taught me what not to value: ego, appearances, power for its own sake. And in doing so, they taught me what to value: authenticity, kindness, and the genuine desire to make a positive difference. So, in a way, I'm grateful for those hard lessons. They made me who I am. Do you have a relationship with your family now? I have relationships with some of them. We're rebuilding slowly, carefully, with honesty and boundaries. Some relationships can be saved, others can't, and that's okay. Family isn't just about who you're born to. It's about who shows up for you, who supports you, who helps you become the best version of yourself. That night, I had dinner with James and Sophie. It had become a monthly tradition, the 3 of us meeting to catch up, to support each other, to remember that we were more than our painful past. Dad called me, James said over dessert. First time in 2 years. What did he want? I asked. To tell me that he's proud of me, that I'm doing good work with my teaching. James shook his head. After everything, after years of telling me I was a failure, now he says he's proud. How did that feel? Empty, honestly. I realized I don't need his pride anymore. I'm proud of myself, that's enough. I raised my glass, to being proud of ourselves. They clinked their glasses against mine, and I thought about how far we had all come. The journey from that terrible night at the gala to this moment had been long and painful and complicated, but it had been worth it. Because I had learned the most important lesson of all. My value wasn't determined by the people who couldn't see it. My worth wasn't defined by the family that rejected me. My success wasn't measured by their standards or their approval. I was Darcy Nelson. I built empires and changed lives and transformed pain into purpose. I was the outcast who became the owner, the disappointment who became the CEO, the beggar who became the benefactor. And I did it all on my own terms, in my own way, with my own strength. As I walked back through Westbrook Manor that night, past classrooms full of potential and hallways echoing with hope, I felt a profound sense of completion. This place that had once represented everything wrong with my life now represented everything right about my choices. I stopped in the library, my old sanctuary, now filled with young people chasing their dreams the way I once had. A girl looked up from her laptop and smiled at me. "Thank you for this place," she said shyly. "It's changing my life." "You're changing your life," I told her. "This place is just giving you the tools." Walking up to my room, I passed the spot where my father had thrown champagne on me. I could still remember the humiliation, the shock, the hurt, but those feelings didn't control me anymore. They were just memories, faded photographs of a different version of myself. In my bedroom, the master suite that had once been my father's domain, I opened the window and looked out over the grounds. The gardens were lit with soft lights, the fountain was running, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear laughter. This was my legacy now, not revenge, though that had been satisfying, not wealth, though I had plenty. Not even success, though I had achieved that beyond my wildest dreams. My legacy was transformation. It was taking the worst parts of my story and turning them into the best parts of someone else's. It was proving that being discarded didn't mean being worthless, that being rejected didn't mean being unlovable, that being outcast didn't mean being powerless. I had started this journey seeking justice, seeking to prove them wrong, seeking to make them see what they had missed. But somewhere along the way, I realized that their seeing me didn't matter anymore. I saw myself. I knew my worth. I understood my value. And that was the greatest victory of all. As I prepared for bed that night, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I looked at the woman staring back at me. Confident, successful, complex, flawed, strong. A woman who had been broken and had rebuilt herself into something better than before. I smiled at my reflection. Tomorrow, there would be new challenges, new opportunities, new ways to grow. But tonight, I was simply grateful. Grateful for the journey, grateful for the lessons, even grateful for the pain that had taught me who I really was. Because that girl who was thrown out of Westbrook Manor, champagne dripping from her dress, shame burning in her chest, had become a woman who owned Westbrook Manor and everything it represented. Who had taken a symbol of cruelty and turned it into a beacon of hope, and that was a story worth telling, that was a life worth living, that was my triumph. Not over my family, but over the limiting beliefs they had tried to instill in me. Not against my father, but for the thousands of people who would benefit from what I had built. I climbed into bed, feeling the weight of the day settling over me. But it was a good weight, the weight of a life fully lived, of choices fully owned, of a future fully embraced. And as I drifted off to sleep in Westbrook Manor, in the house that was now mine in every way that mattered, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, complete peace. The beggar had become the benefactor. The outcast had become the owner. The scorned daughter had become the CEO who changed lives. And Darcy Nelson, finally, was home.